Hey everyone, Leslie Rice here, creator of The Signal and Terra Obscura with a few announcements. First off, I know everyone's hungry for the next full episode of The Signal, and it's certainly on the way. Thank you all for your patience, as my absence has largely been due to some unfortunate personal matters. That aside, our subreddit, r/signal horror fiction, is now up and running again. I'll be bringing back our monthly Best of contest, and now all winners and runners up will receive the offer to have their stories read as part of a monthly bonus episode for our Patreon contributors. Don't despair though, as selected stories will also be aired live during episodes of Twitch of the Death Nerd, our twitch.tv channel, which can be found under the name Signal_Obscura. Also, The Signal, Tainted Worlds, the new tabletop RPG based on our podcast, is currently in alpha testing and will be released soon. We're learning a lot with each new test of the system, and anyone interested in assisting us will receive a free copy to work with. And that brings us to our final announcement and the subject of today's release. Last year, I took on a project by a new author with some interesting ideas, Ian Q. Malcolm. Ian was kind enough to let me narrate his debut novel, The Draxler Program, the tale of a prison convict who takes a long shot at freedom only to find that his odds may have been better facing his term. With his generous permission, I am happy to bring you, over the next few days, the first 3 chapters of the Draxler Program, available right now in ebook format and in audiobook. These 3 chapters are on us, but you may want to go out and buy the rest of the audiobook. After all, it's the worst that could happen. Chapter 2. Clang, clang, clang. The rhythmic pounding of something clashing against my metal bed frame stirred me from my slumber. I looked down toward the footboard because the noise seemed to be coming from that direction. However, the world was still too much of a blur to decipher any distinct shapes. As I went to rub my eyes, my hand stopped abruptly after a few inches of movement. I yanked my arm again, but it was no use. The world sharpened as I turned to look at my hand. There was a rope tied to my seemingly minuscule 10-year-old wrists. Why am I tied to the bed? My eyes darted back toward my footboard. "What's happening?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. My father stood at the end of my bed with a wooden broom in his hand. It had been the broomstick's periodic collisions with my footboard that made the clanging noise. His face had twisted into a smile as he watched confusion sweep over me like a wave. I found my voice again. "Dad, what's happening?" In an instant, his smile vanished and was replaced by a scowl, which reminded me of the time I threw up on the set of one of his shows. Had I done something wrong? What could I have done? "I'm not your father," he yelled as he swiftly raised the broomstick, and I let out a prepubescent scream as it struck me across my midsection. "Ugh!" I groaned as I woke to find blinding rays of light in my eyes. I quickly slammed my eyelids shut, but the orange glow could still be seen, even with them closed. As I tried to pull the blanket up to shield my eyes, my body froze. I could feel a tightness around my wrists, and I knew the feeling all too well to mistake it for anything else. I had been restrained, but why? "Good morning, Mr. Rivers," a male voice said in what I considered to be too cheery a voice given my predicament. "Where am I? Why am I in restraints?" "Try to relax, Mr. Rivers," the man said. That's a much easier instruction to give than it is to follow, especially if you don't remember where you are or why you've been tied up. "You've just woken up from surgery," he said. "It was necessary for us to place a vagus nerve implant in your neck in order for you to be admitted into the Draxler Program." The memory of Inara explaining how the implant worked and why it was necessary came back to me. They needed a way to make sure that the clients in the program didn't try to run away or commit any violent acts against anyone they might come in contact with during their rehabilitation. Apparently, the implant connected to my vagus nerve was the stone capable of slaying those 2 birds. It was able to track my movements if I tried to escape, and it could slow my heart rate enough to knock me out if I got out of line. As for the restraints, he said, a few of the first people admitted into the program lashed out at some of the hospital staff. Although most people experience neck pain and sensitivity to light after the surgery, a few people act out violently. We just have to keep the restraints on you until we're sure that you aren't a threat to yourself or others. I hope you understand. Oh, I understood all right. I understood that they restrained and tagged me like they would a wild animal, and they even had the foresight to give me an on-off switch, which reminded me that I had to become Lord Kiss-Ass to everyone I met, otherwise I'd face an early trip to the washer. After I mentally replayed the conversation I'd had with this guy, I wasn't off to the best of starts. I needed to open my eyes and get a better sense of who I was dealing with here. Although the room still seemed unusually bright, at least it was bearable this time around. Based on the fact he wore lilac-colored scrubs instead of a white coat, I found it safe to assume he was a nurse. His cheerfulness, on the other hand, was slightly harder to gauge. There was a chance he could be having just a particularly wonderful day, but the exuberance with which he spoke didn't seem like an occasional feature to his personality. No, he struck me as the type of guy who puked sunshine and shit rainbows. Fortunately, I knew what the annoyingly happy type liked. Someone else who spewed their sunshine nonsense. That makes perfect sense to me, I said as I tried to pepper a believable amount of cheer into my voice. I can assure you I'm not a threat to you or others, but you might want to leave my arms restrained for a little bit. My eyes are a bit sore, and if I don't let them adjust for a while, then I might try to tear them out. We wouldn't want that, now would we? The nurse asked. How about I do this? You appear to be in a calm state based on your responses and your vitals. I'm going to take the restraints off your legs and waist so you have enough wiggle room to get comfy. I've got a few other patients to check on, but when I get back, if your eyes are feeling better by that point, of course, then I can take the ones off your wrists as well. How does that sound, Mr. Rivers? Please, you can call me Pete, and that sounds like a plan to me. The nurse released the restraints on my waist and legs and made his way out the door. Although I wasn't thrilled about having my arms tied, at least I could shift around the bed somewhat. The first thing I had to do was get my feet out from under the suffocation of the blanket. I don't know why, but I've never liked the feeling of having my feet under the blanket. Fucking a deep, raspy voice said from the right side of the room. I'm trying to figure out how you managed to say so many words while choking on his cock at the same time. My foot had been on the verge of freedom from the blanket when he spoke, and I pulled it back into the center of the bed. How had I not noticed that there was another person in the room? I can assure you I'm no threat. Ugh, gluck, gluck, he said, mocking my previous conversation with the nurse by portraying me as a southern belle and using graphic hand gestures to imitate choking on a rather large dick. My eyes are a bit sore. Gluck, gluck. Please, you can call me Pete. Gluck, gluck, gluck. His unprovoked comments were tough to gauge. The first thing you say to someone isn't usually a crass gay joke unless you're a drunk frat boy trying to haze some poor soul pledging to their fraternity. He could have been trying to assert his dominance over me to give himself alpha status in the room, but that didn't make sense. I mean, who is so insecure with themselves that they need to assert their dominance over another person they're never going to see again? It had to be a stupid frat boy joke, which meant my natural response should be to return the favor. I'm not sure what you're getting at, killer, I said with a laugh, but from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're the only one in this room who knows his way around a dick. He shot up in his bed like a rocket. Clearly he could throw around the jokes, but he was the type of guy who couldn't take one. Jesus, why could I not have just kept my mouth shut? The fuck you just say to me, boy? He asked. Something about the way he said, boy, made my hair stand on end. I was not sure who this guy was, but my gut said he had more than a few screws loose. Time had come to douse the embers before anything could have a chance to catch fire. Sorry, man, I said. I didn't mean anything by that. I thought you were joking with me, so I made a stupid joke in return. We good? Nah, boy. We ain't good, he said as he got out of bed. This gave me the chance to finally see exactly who I was dealing with, and it was a mixture of good and bad news. Okay, it was mostly bad. What was the good news? Well, there were three details I saw as being in my favor. One, the guy was tiny. I didn't have a ruler handy, but he could have been taller than 5 foot nothing on a good day. Two, he sported a hospital gown, which meant there was a chance he wasn't at 100%. Three, he had a bandage on his neck, which might have meant that he had also received the Draxler Program's vagus nerve implant. Maybe I could bond with him over that, or at least distract him with it long enough for a nurse or someone else to come back to the room. However, it was the bad news that held my attention at the moment. Despite the fact that he was too short to ride most roller coasters, the guy was ripped beyond belief. I couldn't even begin to imagine the amount of steroids he would have had to take to make Arnold Schwarzenegger look like his bitch. To make matters worse, the guy had prison tattoos running from his calves all the way up to his neck. After spending plenty of years in prison, I didn't worry about most tattoos anymore. However, there was the occasional exception, and the giant swastika tattooed over his jugular firmly landed in the red flag category. I might be only 25% African American, but even a drop of African blood is enough to send backwards ass schmucks like this one over the edge. What could possibly be worse than having a pocket-sized Adolf on roids coming at you? Oh yeah, the fact that I was strapped to a bed, which made it impossible to either get away or properly defend myself. I ain't ever good when I got some porch monkey insinuating that I'm a faggot. If it weren't for the strong likelihood that this miniature pile of human feces would try to kick my ass, then I would compliment him on his use of the word insinuating. His vocabulary was more abundant than I had originally thought. I'm not insinuating anything, I said more hurriedly than I meant to. Hey, well, what's the bandage on the side of your neck? Are you in the Draxler program as well? The question caused him to pause as he reached the side of my bed, but not for as long as I would have liked. He brushed his fingers along his bandage as he stared down at me. As much as I wanted to turn away, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I stared at his yellowing teeth and tried not to choke on the stench of his breath, which reeked like a bloated orca decaying on the beach. Yeah, what about it? He said down to me as he watched himself slowly walk his fingers up my leg. Even with the protective layer of the blanket, I could feel my skin crawl. I'm in the program too. We might have to work with each other for the next 3 years. If that's the case, then we better bury the hatchet now, or it could be a miserable few years for us. Besides, if you do anything stupid right now, then they might send you to the washer before the program even starts. I couldn't tell if he heard me or not. He seemed to be too focused on watching his hand walk up my body. As he worked his way from my waist to my chest, he finally responded. Or I could kill you now. That way, we ain't got to work together. Besides, he said as he switched back to his mocking tone, they ain't gonna wash me just yet. They need to experiment on me first. Come on, I started to say before he cut me off by wrapping his hand around my throat. His death grip prevented the onslaught of curses from escaping my mouth, so I screamed them internally. I needed to free myself if I had any chance of survival. There was no way I could allow myself to be wiped out by some pint-sized racist asshole. I tried to swing my knee into him with all my might, but I failed to make contact with him. Shit, I thought to myself. There was nothing I could do to save myself, and both of us knew it. Just when it looked like my luck had run out, his grip on my neck loosened, and the most precious oxygen flooded my lungs. Before I knew it, he let go of my neck entirely and stumbled away from my bed. As Pocket Adolf passed out and slumped to the floor, the nurse from before and a doctor entered the room. Good morning, Mr. Rivers, the doctor said. I'm Dr. Begonia Vizcaya. I see you had the pleasure of meeting your program mate, Mr. George Ivy. How's your neck feeling? It's been better, I said hoarsely. What the hell just happened? She glanced back to where the nurse was checking on the still unconscious George Ivy before proceeding to examine my neck. Yes, that. We were alerted by security that Mr. Ivy had approached your bed in a menacing fashion. We told them that we would head over right away and gave them permission to knock him out if he got out of hand. I had mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I was grateful because without them throwing the switch, I would be dead. On the other hand, this meant the implant wasn't some made-up sci-fi scare tactic. The thing clearly worked, and I wanted to make sure I didn't get the honor of experiencing it firsthand. "I think it's safe to take you out of these restraints," she said. "Besides, it's almost time for you and Mr. Ivy to leave the hospital." "What for?" I asked. My question drew a laugh from the doctor. "Well, your program doesn't take place here at the hospital. We only take care of the initial surgery or any other medical attention you may need during your rehabilitation. However, your rehab itself takes place at your program's facility." "I see," I said as I rubbed my newly freed wrists. "Good," she said. "There are some clothes in the cupboard for you, and I would suggest getting changed quickly. Your ride will be here soon, and you'd probably feel more comfortable meeting Dr. Draxler and the rest of your program mates fully dressed." Thank you for listening. Again, the Draxler Program is currently available in ebook format and in audiobook. Thanks again for your support, and I'll see you next time on The Signal.